Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the AI InterConnect Podcast. I'm your host, Laurent. On this show, we explore real insights from founders, investors, and operators building across tech, advisory, and global ecosystem. AI InterConnect is a platform designed to highlight authentic conversation with leaders who are shaping how companies think, grow, and make decisions. And today I'm joined by Avy Loren Cohen and Senior Managing Partner at Raise Capital, and also the CEO and founder of ALC, a strategic advisory firm, and executive with leadership, decision making, and business strategy across multiple industries. Avy, thanks for being here. Very happy to have you on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, then you do a lot of things. Let's start. Very easy. Let's start with your background so listeners understand the path that led you here. You clearly have a very wide background across startup, advisory, this new fund with Formula One, it is, and even investment ecosystem, which is quite rare. Evie, how did your experience across startups, advisory role, investment environment shape the way you see funders and executive today?
Well, that's a really big question. I'll give you the 10 poles, the key steps, the in between you can ask. Well, I started in business really early. That's the biggest thing. Father was a great mentor. And from an early age, I worked with him. From the age of 5, I would go to work with him whenever I could. That influenced a lot of my entrepreneurial and business influence and interests, as opposed to my brother who gravitated to my mother and became a psychologist and loved that side of the world. I became the person that liked the business side as my father did. And that led into traveling and going to trade shows and other things like this. So you really got a taste for it at a young age. And then I went into a partnership with an individual in the consumer electronics industry at the age of 23, where I was managing a variety of people and built distribution across the globe in about 1,200 locations with service agencies and sales rep agencies. And I managed and trained and designed products. And at the same time was doing R&D in that space where we created the first all-in-one home theater, in a box concept. And we created surround sound for Canada and other things. We did a lot of stuff. And I led all that stuff at the age of 23. And by the time I left the company, 3 years, it grew 10 times. And that was me building that. When you get a taste for that at 23 years old and you're coming at 26, the sky is the limit in a sense, the way you think you can really grow something. Without my father's background, I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing what I did in that role. And that's where it just took off from there. That's where I really, cut my teeth in entrepreneurship. Because when I went there, it wasn't a startup, but it was still early stage. So I got a taste for maximizing the resources, what little you have, and making, one egg feel like two eggs, if you know what I mean. So, so that was that. And bit by bit, I built out. I knew I wanted to be in marketing at the beginning. I focused on a lot of things in marketing. I didn't realize I was a business strategist till about 15 years ago, to be quite frank. It's funny. You don't realize what you're capable of doing. There's like that Dunning-Kruger or Kruger-Dunning theory that was done at Cornell years ago, where they said the people that know underestimate, the people that don't know overestimate in terms of confidence. So I always went on the side that if I know it, I'm sure everybody else knows it, until I experienced certain situations which people were saying, no, people don't usually do things that quick and that easily and see it that clearly. Then I started doing research and figured out, oh, I'm a business strategist. So as a result, about 15 years ago, I changed my path and I had been in a variety of startups already. I had already exited a biotech company where I participated in all the marketing, all the distribution, all the branding, and also created additional patents for the company as well. So, and that was a global company as well. So it was very interesting. And we were in a variety of fields: aviation, automotive, janitorial, sanitation, marine. We were in so many industries. So it was very interesting. Again, it was very entrepreneurial, very startup. And of course, these were the days before we had, Y Combinator and accelerators and incubators and all that stuff. And they weren't even teaching any of this type of stuff in the universities and schools. So everything we were doing was literally flambant neuf, brand new. It was just totally new and pioneering that stuff, which is why I decided to go into the startup world and provide guidance and help for startups, because I wish I had had that. So that's where I got into Plug and Play and Techstars and other organizations. And then I started working in family office, which got me into the high net worth space. And working in the high net worth space opens you up to a very different audience from investments and lifestyle. And my focus was not as much investments as it was about generational wealth preservation and growth. In plain English, it means that making sure that the current and next generation, especially the next generation, are in line with the founding generation as well as the current generation. So they want to stay in, they want to participate, they feel needed, they feel involved, and they're building their family business and continuing it. So that took me in a lot of different directions. Going into the consulting side of the business happened mostly because I would over-charitably help people. I love helping people, so that's what I did. I helped a lot of people. So I'd restructure their company, or I would, give them a new strategy to, merge with somebody. It's all types of stuff. And I have a policy of not charging friends and family, even if they're business acquaintances. I don't charge them. Until my wife said, "What are you doing?" Honestly, and she said, "What are you doing? You're spending a lot of time helping your friends and associates. So why don't you just open up your own consulting firm?" It's not a bad idea. So I did some research, and luckily my father-in-law was a very big consultant at the time. And he guided me in terms of what, the pricing structure should be, confirmed that I'm a business strategist and what strategists are worth. And of course, told me, he says, don't focus on the Canadian market, because the Canadian market, well, your currency is a lot less. They don't pay for growth in the same way Americans and Europeans do. So I really stayed very much out of the Canadian audience and went Europe, Asian, and American, where people gladly will pay to grow. And that's what I did. So I built the company, and it took years to build the network. And that's where the heavy work came. Understanding what type of customer I wanted, what type of work I wanted to do. So I knew I wanted to do mergers and acquisitions, corporate restructuring, corporate turnarounds, a lot of heavy duty strategy, focus on long-term stuff, especially growth oriented projects. If they're not growth, I really don't get attracted to working with firms that are like that. And it's oddly enough, there are companies that are not looking at growth. They're looking at other issues. And unless I see a growth picture in it, I don't really get involved, because it becomes a little bit boring for me, at least. So the second thing is, I decided I only want to work with the boards and C-suites, or those that are being trained to become in the C-suite. And that expanded my path towards providing training, education, and mentoring and coaching for senior executives and C-suites, which gravitated into the startups to train the startups how to be senior leaders, how to be a leader, and also how to be a CEO, because a lot of startups, the founders are not CEOs. They don't have that experience. And interesting enough, what you learn in startups, I was able to pass into these mature companies. A lot of mature companies forget the beginnings or weren't in the beginnings of a company. And the coolest thing about startups is they cross-pollinate. They don't have as many silos, and very few of them do at the beginning. Over time, they start creating silos and titles and offices and doors and become more separated and limit communication. But at the beginning, which is what's very powerful and why they grow fast, because they don't have all that. And it's one for all and all for one. They're all the musketeers. And they just go for the gold and just build the company, and that's their focus. And the egos are much lower at that point. So I actually wrote an article about this, of what mature companies can learn from startups, and to bring that back. And that talks about corporate culture and governance and role modeling and so forth, which led to a lot of research in why companies actually slow down in their bell curve of growth. Most companies attribute to, well, there's the economy, there's government, there's geopolitical, there's interest rates. Most of that can be averted if you have good corporate culture, because good corporate culture means that people are proactive, they're involved, they're recognized, they're rewarded, they're part of the process. And instead of saying, well, that's not my role, I don't get paid for that, it's out of my scope, it's after hours. In other words, they're just filling a little mold. That's it. The ones that are in this corporate culture, they're involved. They'll go to their senior or whatever's in a meeting and say, you know what, I was thinking of something. I saw this happening. I think we're going to go into this sort of recession, this sort of situation. I think we have an opportunity to take advantage of it. And a good case example was, when COVID came in, I saw opportunities for the clients that I was dealing with. And I deal with very large to startup companies. It ranges. And the startups keep me fresh. So the large companies with these large budgets for advertising, marketing, communications, about half of them wanted to cut dramatically. The other half wanted to cut reasonably. And, I spoke to these CEOs and founders and said to them, look, you have a choice. Most companies are going to think as you and want to cut and trim as much as they can. And that's going to be the weakness. This is an opportunity because as they're doing that, we restructure, we reposition, we can actually get rid of some employees legitimately now. So we can cut some of the fat over there, which a lot of companies did do, as you know. And then what we can do is stand out because everybody's not advertising and promoting and being in the light. They're hibernating now. Well, they still have to do some forms of business. And if you look at the food service and hospitality industry, which I do consult on, there are restaurants with large square footage, which you've probably seen in most countries, where instead of these big family restaurants and large size, and some did remain, but a lot of them converted to smaller, 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 square feet. And it basically was mostly like a quick sit down, but mostly takeout and delivery. So what I foresaw as a strategist was the food service industry is also going to change. So I would consult with my clients and say, listen, change your square footage, your strategy, and look to it now because people are going to get used to the next 2, 3 years, taking stuff out and having things delivered. And that's exactly what happened. And if you look, a lot of restaurants did cut their square footage and opened up more locations, but smaller ones, so they can serve faster and quicker delivery and takeout. So all these types of things, when you look at times like this, there's opportunities. As a strategist, you look at this and you see opportunities, and that's the role. That's what we look. We see where they can see. Growing into this position didn't just come naturally. I did do consulting in Toronto. I did have a mentor. He was the CEO of Consumers Distributing back in the day. He's also a senior executive at the Steinberg grocery chain in Montreal and the Cardinal Group. So I did have mentoring in terms of consulting from him and learned that and learned about giving value and putting skin in the game. So that changed how I function with companies. In terms of most companies and consultants will say, well, here's nice story, but here's what I charge. Here's this. I do the opposite. I would say, okay, I think we can work together. We're going to work for free a little bit. Let's get to know each other. Let's date. And it gives me a chance to, get to know them without risk. And it gives them a chance also. So my strategy was we're going to get to know each other. I'm not going to charge them for the learning curve if there is one. And bit by bit, if I don't like them, I can say sayonara. I didn't charge them anything. They didn't lose. They actually got, right? And as time would go on, my goal would be to provide value, very quick, immediate, powerful value, which if you think about it, any client would want that right away from a consultant or a service provider anyway. So I would do it naturally. But my purpose was at that point, they're going to say, okay, what does it take to get you to be, to be our partner or to be our consulting firm, et cetera, et cetera. When you do that, your negotiation is very simple. This is what I charge. Fantastic. Let's sign. Why? Because they already know what the value is. When you're dealing with an intangible, when you're charging $1,000 an hour plus or, high monthly stipends, what am I getting in return? But when you work with them for free and you show them what they're getting, they're very quick to pay because they get it. And that's how I function. That worked really great in Europe and really great in the US. Ironically, even Canada, but it doesn't matter. The currency's low. So that was a strategy that I built. And as a result, I still have lots of clients that continually contact me, see how they're doing, see how I'm doing. And my philosophy was always about working with people and the business. So I never separated their personal behaviors. In other words, you cannot separate the human from the professional. So we've dealt with human issues, psychology, bipolar, ADHD, depression, marital affairs, or issues. I shouldn't say affairs. There are no affairs, but marital issues, separation, divorce, all that type of stuff. And that helped these people improve in their roles as executives. So all that push to come, where did that lead me to? All things combined from the education, from the organizations that I worked with, I've just continually moved to the point where I became what people say is you're like a business psychologist. You look at the picture, you don't come in like a typical consulting firm. Here's the data, run. I'm the complete opposite. I'm all about people. I'll analyze the people, then I'll get the data. And most of the time clients are wrong in what they think is wrong anyway. So that's why I function like that as well. Because people, if you sum this up, business is simple. People make it complicated. It's all about people. They'll grow or destroy your business. So I focus really on the human component, the psychology of business.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you for this introduction. It's wonderful. It's definitely. You talked a lot about psychology behind decision, which is a very powerful distinction. And You also say something that struck me before these episodes. You describe startup as a marathon of pain,
Hmm.
and also mention that many people do not truly understand what building a company really means. What are the most misunderstood pain point founders experience behind the scene that are rarely discussed publicly?
That's a fantastic question, and it's a big question. The parallel example I'm going to give you that the audience may relate to is, if you look at Gordon Ramsay or Robert Irvine, they had these cooking TV shows that would talk about restaurants that opened up. And when they'd ask, why did you open this up or tell us what your story is? Often you'd hear people say, well, people thought I was really good. I cook so well, or I always wanted to open up a restaurant, or I saw it on TV. And the bottom line is their perception of reality is completely wrong. They got into the business not knowing what they're really getting into. And then before you know it, they're in debt for, anywhere from like a couple hundred to $1 million, of debt, right? And they're in the weeds and they really don't have depth and knowledge in what they've gotten into. And then these guys come in, of course, and try to, restructure the company essentially, or the restaurant, right? So the parallel that I'll zoom in on is perception of reality. So a lot of people have seen examples. The restaurant example in the business space would be, Zuckerberg. Look what he built. He was a kid in school. They don't know his backstory. They don't know his education. They don't know his family network. Most people don't know that very famous, I won't list, but very famous people, invest in his company at an early stage. And you don't get that often in most startups. So most, people, I had clients that say to me, you know what, I want to be the Starbucks of the cafe industry, or I want to be the Walmart of the, and do you know what it took to get there? One classic person says, I want to be like Panera Bread. Do you know what they started off as? Yeah, Panera Bread. No, that's not how they started. Nobody knows what it really takes. So they themselves have these misguided ideas or perceptions of what it is because they're looking at the end result of here's what they became. I want to become that. And no one tells them what it is in between. And by the way, they don't teach us in the business schools. They don't teach us at incubators and accelerators. They don't teach us at Y Com or any of these places. They don't even talk about it. So what's common? Every single startup founder is going to go through the same pains, the same BS. And if you look at investors, fundamentally, especially the sophisticated ones, they're looking at the end of the day, trust. Everything's all about trust. And the trust really comes down to, are you the individual that is going to last? You're going to endure. Do you have the tenacity? Do you have the focus? Do you have the commitment? Do you have the passion? Do you have what it takes, from a business, acumen? Do you have the experience behind you? They're looking at numerous issues or, aspects to see if you're the person that could take this across the line, give us the return on investment we have, predicted or anticipated in the time frame we hope for, which usually for them is about 5 years. When you look at these individuals, they think they're going to go through this path and they're going to go through the raise and they go through pitch events and they're going to meet people and they're going to do a patent thing and get a lawyer and, are going to count. They're looking at these 10 poles of positivity. The in between, depression. There's a massive amount of people in the startup space of depression. There's a massive amount of people that go bankrupt or that dwindle their savings dramatically because they believe that if they commit and they believe in themselves, like if you really believe in yourself, okay, put your ass in the line and quit your job and go for your savings and borrow and do what you're supposed to do, and you'll do it. Most of them don't. They lose a lot of their savings and they end up owing their family and their friends like crazy. And that's the other piece, your friendships, your networks. They say about business, never do business with friends and family, right? There's a reason for that, right? So if you think about the concept of the early rounds of a startup, friends, families, and of course the last one's fools, right? Because you got to be a fool to invest in the startup, right? But yet you're asking your friends and your family because you're idiots that will do it because they believe in you and they trust you, right? Okay. So I can't tell you how many stories and how much I've been witness to of friends and families that got broken up and blown up because of the startup. So I'm telling people, you know what? Don't do friends and family. If you like your friends and love your family, do not do that. Please do not do that for the sake of you. For me, I'll get paid more. I don't care. But you don't do it. So at the end of the day, you lose personal finances, you lose friends and family. And on the family side, that's the other part. You can ostracize yourself from children if you have boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other. And if you're married, many marriages have broken up because of this. And there's even a parallel to a restaurant slash chefs. They go through something similar, although they actually have a lot of alcohol and drugs, but that's another story. So in this case, there's a lot of things in a line. You don't sleep very well. Some people are more disciplined. They still do exercise. Some people, I've seen so many people, I'll do exercise when I have time. So their weight goes up. They're sitting in the office more, so they're not physical. So the whole physical, thing goes down. So their mind goes down. And that's where the depression circle comes. And of course, they're not spending because they're preserving money for their startup. They don't realize things. And I always say to startups, okay, listen, first of all, find yourself a mentor because you have no experience or not significant experience and you've never been a startup. That's the first thing. Second of all, I was always brought up with the mentality of if you want a successful business, find a lawyer and give them a piece of the business, and find an accountant and give them a piece of the business because they'll basically watch your ass and make sure. Now, I have seen so many startups screw themselves, excuse my French, as they say. But the reality is they do stupid moves. And the biggest stupid moves they do is how they raise money. And they don't realize all these different laws, especially if you're, raising from people that are out of your country. There are SEC rules, there's AMF rules, there's laws all over, state and provincial and federal. And a lot of even average lawyers don't even understand it. You need a lawyer that understands fundraising, and they have to understand out of countries fundraising and what you need. So a lot of people don't realize, well, in every state and every province, you have to register that you're raising funds, and then you have to, register that there is we won't get into legal stuff, but there's a lot of things that have to be done. So what ends up happening is they make mistakes, and it bites them on the ass later on without getting into details. So right off the bat, the smart thing is to find a lawyer that understands corporate structuring, partnership agreements, kind of like in a prenup, before you get married, everybody's happy. Let's get a prenup. In a business too, tons of businesses blow up like bands blow up because of relationships, right? Once again, psychology and people. So when you start a business, have a partnership agreement, do job profiles or descriptions. So everybody knows exactly what their roles are and it matches, it jives with their expectations. So they're less prone to have arguments because you said you're going to do, or I thought you're going to do. No, I'm doing exactly my job. That was your job. Oh,
Exactly.
all of these miscommunications, assumptions, which are to assume is to err anyway, so it's mistakes. But again, it's all the human element. This is not about business. Business is actually quite simple. That's why business schools and all these things have systems you can teach that. You have books on it. The psychology, what screws it up, you can't write customized, like a customized course is worth more because it's tapered to someone's own psychology, right? You have standard things, standardized. But that just helps people on the surface. So you need experience. So what I've seen is basically people that don't know, don't understand, don't have the right information, don't have the right mentors, don't have mentors, and make terrible mistakes along the way. And for that, they pay for it horribly. And they all think, by the way, within the first year or two max, they're going to be fine. The reality is that's if you're lucky.
No, definitely. It's the harder job. Startup. Yeah. You 100% on your job and nothing else. You get weight and you lose your wife. Okay. Then you also yourself, you also shared that you write extensively and that your articles are backed by research and real experience, which added a strong education layer to your work. What motivates you to turn your experiences and research into written content and education insight for funders?
In short, I wish I were a psychologist in the back of my mind. My brother went into psychology and I grew up in a very
In two
spiritual
sentences.
home. Helping people. That's what it is. It's just helping people, giving back. Same thing for the, why do I be part of these startup organizations? To help people, to give back. I like helping. That's really what it comes down to.
Is there an article or concept that you wrote that that funders should deeply understand today?
Well, if you go onto Medium, which is where I publish mostly, sometimes on Substack, I have quite a bit, but mostly on Medium, there's a lot of articles on startup business management leadership. And in there, I talk about some very important things for the startup world, and that is things you should and should not do. And they're in various aspects. So such as, in a leadership role, fundraising when dealing with venture capital investors, stuff like that. But overall, if you're a startup, there are specific articles for that will help you prevent making mistakes. That's what it is, about helping them to prevent making mistakes. And there's one article that has a good list of things. There's other articles that talk about what typically successful people in startups look like. If you had to describe them? For someone who's not sure, am I a startup guy, person? Read that article and see, do I have those criteria? Am I a tenacious person? Am I a committed person? All these characteristics, that's not a bad idea to check out.
Love it.
Yeah. And a lot of people in entrepreneurship, by the way, tend to be ADD or ADHD, which is the hyper side. The stats are huge, which is why I got into ADD coaching and advisory, especially in the entrepreneurship space, by the way. And there's some articles about being more efficient as a leader in a startup. And some people with ADD are very distracted along the way. It takes them a little longer to get there. Some of them are high performance and they get there even faster than the average person, by the way. So it's interesting.
I love it. Very, very interesting. You mentioned also being involved. You mentioned, we talked about being involved in multiple areas, including startup, that we know, advisory, we describe, an investment fund linked to Formula One, we mentioned it, race, which give you a very unique macro perspective. How does working across different industries and investment environment change the way you evaluate funders and leadership decisions?
So this is a very interesting question. So context first. If you look at consulting firms, they usually have specialized teams. If you look at board of directors and so forth, they usually have individuals that relate to their industry, to their market, to their technology, whatever it is. It's very, very specific. Over the years, people have been more appreciative of generalists. And I consider myself a generalist, but a lot more, because I have a lot more depth than average in various sectors. But generalists, as a rule of thumb, are able to see a broader picture of things. And what I learned in my early consulting days with Global Niches in Toronto with Michael Haberman, as he said to me, is that, in other words, this is not my idea. I took this from him. And that is, you come to a firm or situation, and if you're a specialist in one area, it's like you've got the blinders on. You can't see around you. You can't see on the side of you. You can only see what's in front of you, right? And directly behind you. That's your past, right? He says, his consulting firm, which is what I do with mine, is we bring value. And the value is we don't have blinders on. We cross-pollinate from every industry, their concepts, their principles, their strategies, all that type of stuff gets cross-pollinated into a new unique strategy for that client's need in that industry. And in plain English, it's like this. If someone has been in the pharma industry for years, you're typically going to use pharma experts. The pharma experts are typically going to refer to pharma research, pharma data, and stuff like this. But if you go to somebody like myself as a consultant, what you're coming to me for, which is where I add the value, is you can talk about your issue, but I'm not going to look at it in the same way that person would. I'm going to look at it in a much global, broader picture and understand, okay, where are you? Where do you need to be? What do you think in between is the problem? With that, I'm basically in the brain is working and saying, okay, what does this relate to this industry? What did I do with that client? And all this stuff is mixing in the pot, and it's spitting out basically ideas of strategy of moving forward and hypotheses of where the problems are. At that point, I spit that out and communicate that, and I'm able to dig deeper to the point, faster to the point with the CEO or the board or whomever's looking to my help, and finding out that their situation is not what it is. It's a symptom of the real problem, which is what I hypothesize on. So all that to say is, if I were a specialist, I don't believe I would be able to consult and get to things very quickly and understand things in the way I do if I was just in the blinders. So being, as I call it, a competitive advantage to clients is that I'm not from a industry. And I always tell my clients, when you look at your board selection, make sure you have somebody who's not even from your industry and not even from now he could be, or the person could be from, let's say, manufacturing. Okay. But it doesn't have to be your industry. The person could be from retail, but it doesn't have to be from retail. But furthermore, get people that are not from retail. Get people that weren't from manufacturing, because they're going to have a different take on it. And it always happens that someone will come up and be a catalyst and say, that's interesting, but, in our field, and then someone will say, yeah, but we're not in your field. Yeah, just listen. Here's the parallel lesson, da-da-da-da. And you see this all the time. Someone comes out and says, here's something different. That's a great idea. And you know where the great ideas, a lot of them come from? People that aren't from inside the industry. That's the point.
Love it. Okay. um, yeah, being a generalist, medical doctor, not a surgeon. Okay. Then giving your advisory exposure to leaders and an organization, your perspective on the future is particularly valuable. Looking ahead, 12 to 18 months, what does success realistically look like for the leaders and companies you typically advise and yourself?
Yeah. So with everybody right now, what I'm seeing and hearing, and this is nothing new, people who are astute and paying attention to various media sources, it really comes down to, without naming names of individuals, organizations, but fundamentally, you've got geopolitical unrest, you've got wars that are going on, and we don't live in a stable period. In the 80s, if you recall, at least I do, it was a pretty stable period. Companies were not very lean; they were actually very fat in terms of how they ran. In every period, you have different challenges. We're living in a very interesting period. A lot of the management, especially middle management today, have not been through serious war situations. They've not been through serious recession issues. They've not been through tariff hikes that affect every aspect of the world. They've not been through where countries are now ramping up and building their arsenal of machine of war. It's the first time countries across the globe are saying that the U.S. is not their partner anymore, that the U.S. doesn't care, and that they're on their own. It's the first time you have Russia coming out there and trying to take control and bring back its former glory as the USSR once was. These concepts were not present. We also have technology that's playing a massive role. Your whole subject of AI. Where is AI leading us? How is that affecting us? No, it's not replacing tons of jobs as people thought. Yes, it is replacing jobs. So where is it? Okay. If we look at a lot of tech companies, a lot of them have lied about their statements. They've purged employees out and claimed that it's AI when in fact they overestimated what they need because of COVID. And coming out of COVID, they couldn't fire them. So as a result, they figured COVID is a great scapegoat, and to their shareholders and to the PR side of things, it's better off to say it's AI because everybody's accepting that. The reality is AI is affecting. So yeah, you have a lot of people now that have become expert in AI and that weren't programmers and so forth, and can do, let's say, content creation. They can create a beautiful looking article. They can speed up research that would take a lot more time. They can do a lot of things. Bigger issues are things like software development. So, when I speak to all the tech companies that I work with and you look at software, a lot of them are saying, so the mid levels and above are safe so far, but the problem is the low levels aren't. What's the problem? Well, where do you think low levels come from? They come from the area of growth so they can become a mid level. The problem is a lot of the AI is replacing a lot of that initial stage of programmers. So we have this conundrum. We have this software that's out there now that is literally saying you can't get on the first step. You got to jump 2 steps to get to the next rung. Well, how does that grow software developers to become mid and above level developers and engineers? It's a major problem. Then we look at the legal side. Very interesting. So there is software like Law Insider is a very good example. There's tons of them out there. But, law AI software that basically you can throw in a contract, an agreement, all types of stuff. And for the most part, they're pretty damn accurate, especially when it comes to contract law. Lawyers use this across the board, by the way. I'm working with lawyers for different contracts, and it states in it that they will use AI. It's become acceptable, and they're saying they're better than juniors and associates. So think about that. How many jobs are being replaced? How many hours are being replaced? Because, and again, it's at that low rung. So companies have this issue of how do I use AI and management and people? But then there's the other side. There's the abuse of AI, the assumption that people have, especially people who don't really understand how AI works when it comes to software, by the way, not mechanics. And that is, well, they take whatever they see as gospel. And that's where everybody says, oh, you can tell this is AI. You got quotations all over. You got bolds all over. It's written in a circular way. Nothing gets to the point. Yeah, it's 2 years old. Nothing's current. The list goes on. So there's a learning curve there. And there's there used to be the biggest thing in companies is email and surfing. now it's a problem. Even education, that's another area. I know people are professors in different schools and they're saying they know the students are cheating. They know it. How are they dealing with it? That's a whole other story. So what the challenge now is understanding how AI works, where the government is going to play a role, what guardrails are going to be put into place, when are they going to put into place? There's GDPR in Europe, and I wish the rest of the world would have it. It's really strong. It's very good, but they need a GDPR for AI. The second thing we've got about is, the whole idea of the robot revolution. Well, we've had robots for a very long time. Early day machines were robots in a sense because they did replace people. If we look at history, even the Victorian period had various, tools and stuff. So innovation is great, but at what cost? So government will or will not make policies that will affect or indirectly affect companies and their growth and investments. So all this put together, what are they looking at? Do I invest? Do I not invest? And that directly impacts in such a domino effect way throughout, it ripple effects throughout the economy. We've got resources, especially fuel, that keeps going up with all the uncertainty in Venezuela, in the US, in Russia, and all these other, countries that are producing fuels. Fuel prices keep going up. I remember when fuel was so low, it was a joke. You can have a fat machine. Now you can't have an SUV and need an electric car now. And then we've got the environment. Well, people know or they don't know. They believe or they don't believe. Obviously, U.S. policy now seems to be that they either don't believe, pretend not to believe, or just care about, anything that produces money instead of environment. So depending on the size of the company, there are opportunities and there are risks. It's balancing them out and using someone who is a strategist or people are strategists to be able to see how to look at that stuff, and then combining the team with statisticians, people who understand research and so forth. Will be a team that will look at the past, the present, and judge what the future is going to be based on that. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on. And then we've got interest rates. This is a big issue. Interest rates change all over. Borrowing changes all over. So who knows? I mean, if you look at Canada's a very interesting stage because the US was our biggest trading partner. And now, for the first time, they've woken up and said, hey, as a business, which I grew up with, everybody in manufacturing and distribution would say, if we get 1% of 10% of the US market, we're gone. We're good. We get one product in McDonald's, one product in, Walmart, we're millionaires. That was the mentality for many years. That's a very bad mentality to have. No one was saying, hey, we should do X amount in Europe, X amount in Asia, X amount in the Middle East. No one talked about this for years. Even in business schools, they'll talk about it, but what they execute in business is not as much, unless you're in a global company. But even global companies, that are based in Canada aren't as global as some you might think. They do have distribution, but not in the same way. They're still relying upon the US. So now the US is starting to wake up, Canada, and say, hey, get an army because you don't have anything there. It's time to invest and make the country proud of it, because all we did was look to Big Brother USA and will you take care of us? I mean, that's insulting. We used to have one of the best air forces in the world. We trained the UK. So, we did the Avro, which was way more advanced to many jets generations after the Avro. So aviation, submarines, people, I'm $65 billion invested, I think is the number, into defense. It's insane the amount of money, but it's about time. And then, of course, distribution. Instead of relying on the US, reallocation of resources from, minerals that are used for batteries to aluminum. The list goes on. So now we're taking stuff and we're going global, which is what you should do. You should never have, as a reseller, you should never have all your eggs in one basket. 30%, of your business is from one customer. That's insane. What we had was more than that with the US. So now we're reducing that. So the rest of the world is now changing too. They're watching to Carney, they're watching to Canada and say, hey, they're not taking the BS from the US. You know what? These tariff things, yeah, screw them. Let them be on their own. You know what? We're going to deal amongst us. That is changing how distribution is. That is changing so many different things. And most people don't understand how that affects them today or tomorrow, but it is affecting a lot of people. And in many ways, there's a little pain to get to the game. So today, more than ever, CEOs, leadership, strategists, there's a lot more on the table that they have to take in consideration. It's a lot more complex. There's a lot more layers. And above all this, the umbrella is uncertainty. And, all these conspiracy theories floating in between, fake news stuff that goes in between, it's hard to also navigate what is real and what's not real. So you have to literally strategize for every possibility just in case. So,
That's right. Yeah. No, you completely. I mean, your example on Canada is. I could say the same with Europe. They have no army, or they have one, but nothing consolidated, and waiting for the U.S. to come in. But I think, even though I don't know about U.S. politics, and I don't share a lot of them. I mean, a lot of things, but it's waking up a lot of people to um, to uh, to build something on their own, and um, and and this show is to put all these founders and CEO together and express themselves, and get different points of view. And I really, really, really like our discussion and conversation today. That was great. Thank you so much for joining. Strong, very, very strong insights into leadership psychology, and your founder decision making, and the real realities behind building and scaling many things, not only companies, but even countries. Thank you so much for taking the time, Avy. And that's it for this episode of AI InterConnect. And if you enjoy it, share it with someone who's building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you. See you soon.